Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. And he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she had continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young woman. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your mother and father in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles of her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted." So she kept close to the young woman of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests. And she lived with her mother-in-law.
Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Ruth podcast. I am so glad to be back with my friends Jen and Dr. Justin Jackson. We are diving into Ruth again. And if you haven't, this podcast works best if you have read the text first, or you can even listen to it. So we've got it available for you on this podcast. You can hear it read to you by lovely women of our church, and it just works best for you to be familiar with what's going on. There's a lot of characters, and there's a lot happening. So if you already know that, this will all make more sense.
That's right.
And you will get more out of it if you have considered it first. So if you haven't done that, pause this, go do that, and then come back to us. But for now, we are now going into Ruth chapter 2. The plot literally thickens, and things get a little bit amazing. Not totally amazing yet. It's still just chapter 2. So chapter 2, we get a new character, and his name is Boaz. We do love Boaz. So what do we know about Boaz's introduction, he gets described with several things, like he's a relative of Elimelech, and now he's there goes into all these descriptions of like him greeting people and what's going on, and so Boaz gets belabored. How come?
Tell us about him.
Yeah. Well, he's described first off as a worthy man, which is a huge compliment to just who he is, a worthy man. Something to kind of point out too is there's two worthy characters in Ruth. Boaz is a worthy man, and Ruth is later called a worthy woman. Right?
Oh, that's cool.
And in the original, people don't know this. We read the book of Ruth after the book of Judges because it connects. The original placement of Ruth was after Proverbs 31, which describes the worthy woman.
Yeah.
And can you just imagine, like, back in the day, you'd be reading, he who finds a wife has found an excellent thing, and then it talks about the worthy woman there, and then you get the story of Ruth and Boaz finding a worthy man finding a worthy woman. So just a cool little tidbit there that there is some interplay here of Boaz is the ideal man from Proverbs. He's just a worthy, wise man. He's probably older, for sure. He's more of a peer with Naomi than he is with Ruth.
Wow.
So there's just more of interplay between kind of his age group with her. So he's probably significantly older than Ruth. And I mean, he even compliments her later, like, you're coming to me and not the young, handsome men that, you know. So we're probably looking at an older character who is wise. And again, in his context, he's a bit of an outlier. So if you look at verse 4, Boaz, he came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Now, again, we're in the context of Judges where everything is bad, terrible. Nobody's following the Lord. But in Boaz's field, things are the way they should be. Things are the way they were meant to be. He's speaking number 6. Like you think of the blessing in number 6, the Lord be with you, may his face shine upon you, and may he keep you and bless you. This is a version of that blessing. So I just think one of the reasons I love that is I've always wanted to be a Boaz. The world could be on fire, but in my little pocket of the field, we're going to have an embassy of the kingdom. Like things are going to work the way God wants it to here where I'm at. And that's what Boaz is doing. He's not governor of Bethlehem, so he's not in control of what's happening outside of Bethlehem.
Within his influence.
In his influence, that's right. In fact, you kind of see it with his command to the reapers. When he finds out that this woman from Moab is in his field, he tells his reapers, "Don't touch her." And in Hebrew, it's like, "Don't molest her." You know, so he knows that Israelite men are not good, but in his field, they're going to be honoring of this Moabite woman. They're not going to do the things that they would do outside of his field. So he's just kind of taking it like, these are my borders, and in my field, it's a Joshua statement. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And it's ironic because Boaz's name means strength. So here you find this strong, worthy, wise man who in his field, things happen the way the Lord wants it to happen.
Yeah.
And just to think that, you know, Ruth accidentally stumbles into this pocket of this blessed, true Israel kingdom. Like this is, out of all the fields she could have stumbled in, she could have stumbled in any other field in Bethlehem. I've been to Bethlehem, and it's, I mean, field after field after field. And you're just thinking of, you know, back in the day, there's no boundary markers or anything. You're just walking and trying to glean, and you're living in a context where people don't really give a rip about what God has said.
Yeah.
But you accidentally stumble across the one man's field who is going to do exactly what God has told him to do. And it's just seeing God's providence in that. Oh, and he happens to be a kinsman redeemer.
Just
which connected.
That's right.
Yeah. Connected the family. He's the only one that can help them.
It's Bob Ross paintings. There are no mistakes, only happy accidents. That's
I
right.
love it.
Only happy accidents
I
here.
think I can envision Boaz with a Bob Ross do.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
He is Israeli. It's very possible.
Yeah. Why not?
So as we get in this chapter, she immediately, Ruth goes to Naomi and he's like, "Let me go glean in a field." And I don't know what that means because I don't glean in fields. But talk to us about what it is that a solution to a problem to them eating was, I could just go to a field and start picking grain.
Yeah.
And that's going to be okay for us. So what is happening
And that's
there?
legal. I mean, that's all. Yeah.
This is all legal.
Yeah.
Like this is
he
this a
owns
thing
it,
people
so
do?
Am I stealing? Like, how does that?
Yeah. This is so in ancient Israel, God wants their whole life to be a mini example of the Exodus. Like God took care of them in the Exodus, and he wants them doing things in daily life that rehearse that replicate that. So here's what happened for Israel. God provided food on the ground, literally bread on the ground, and lets them pick it up in the desert and feeds them. And he's like, you're supposed to let the poor sojourner do that as well. I did that for you. You be a mini redeemer to them by letting them pick up ground. So when you're in a field, I mean, you're just looking at, they're grabbing these stalks of plants and they're slicing away. And this is, again, the sovereign serendipity. When you go to slice, what's going to happen? Well, grains are going to fall off the stalk and hit the ground. And God's law is you're not to go pick up those grains off the ground. You're to leave them there. If you pick them up off the ground, you're stealing. This is God's view of it. You're stealing his provision for the poor.
Ooh.
What you accidentally drop is his intentional provision for the poor.
Ooh.
And so as they're doing this, I mean, just grains going all over the ground, and they're to allow the poor people to come behind them and pick up as much as they can off the ground, because that is God's gift to the vulnerable. And so it wasn't even a matter of kindness or hospitality in this case. It's a matter of justice.
Okay.
If you and it's like the land is yours, but it's not yours. God makes it clear all through the Pentateuch, I'm the landlord, you're the tenants. I let you live on my land, and therefore whatever drops in your land is my food for the poor. It's just, that's how they're supposed to live, that they're just tenants, renters, living on the landlord's land, and even their excess, that's kind of their right, is not their right. They're meant to give it away. It's amazing.
So Boaz is this microcosm of God's kingdom working well.
Yes.
What it was supposed to be.
Absolutely.
That Boaz's field is being blessed.
Right.
Like he has plenty to gather in.
Yeah.
So his field's not in famine. He's doing well. He's blessing his servants. His servants bless him. And he's obeying God by allowing the poor to come, someone like Ruth, and gather behind them. And God is glorified because now he's also providing for the sojourner in the land. And this is a little, like you said, outpost of when you obey God and when his kingdom is functioning on the earth. It looks like this.
That's right. And what's cool about Boaz is he's just, right? By obeying God's law, by letting the gleaning happen. But he's also kind. And that word hesed, there's a difference between justice and kindness. Justice is I do what I need, what I know that God wants me to do, because I want to obey the law. I want to do what's right. I want to do what's right. Boaz goes, I don't want to do just what's right. I want to go above and beyond and do what I don't have to do. So he not only allows a Moabite to come and glean he's just obeying the law there. He goes back and he tells his reapers, hey, I want you to go ahead and drop stalks. Like, God never commanded him to do that.
Yeah.
That's right. Extreme hospitality here, where he's not just thinking about what God's dropping, he's intentionally showing kindness to this Moabitess because he has compassion for her. I just think, man, in my own life, there's some moments where I just think about, I just want to do what's right. I'm just going to do what's right. I'm gonna do the minimum of what's right. And Boaz is a reminder of, no, a joyful Israelite, a joyful person of God, is actually not just going to do what's right. He's going to go above and beyond. He's not just going to let the grains drop. He's going to drop stalks because he wants to be overly generous to the people in his field. And I just think that's beautiful. He didn't have to do that.
Right.
That is above and beyond what God asked him to do.
It's incredibly beautiful. I'm thinking about Jesus when he's telling his disciples, like, if someone tells you to walk with them a mile, offer 2.
That's right.
If someone needs your tunic, give them your cloak as well.
Yeah.
Like Jesus is teaching don't think of this as the minimum to get by.
Yeah.
Think of what could I offer that's more. That's
Totally.
even more selfless, that's even more generous.
Yeah.
Because he's pointing to what he does, which is I didn't just do the minimum of what it would be required to just forgive your sin and make sure maybe you don't receive the wrath of God. I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to make you family.
Yeah.
And you will have access to God
Absolutely.
forever. And you will be made not just servants, but children.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it goes even deeper. Like, if Ruth was a Moabitess, or is an Israelite, let's just say she was an Israeli woman, him letting her glean off the field was a matter of justice. Him dropping the stalks was a matter of kindness. but the fact she's a Moabite makes her unclean. She's ceremonially unclean. So by being like Gentiles and Jews are not supposed to share houses. They're not supposed to share cups.
Right.
They're not supposed to drink after each other. And there's something really beautiful that happens here. You don't see it directly in the text, but you hear where Boaz tells her that she's to, you look at it in verse 9 here. He finds out who she is. His men come. He commands them not to touch her. And he says this let's just back up to verse 8. Now listen, my daughter, do not go glean in any other field or leave this one. I think he knows the context he's in. Like in another field, you actually might get killed.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
in another field, somebody might hurt you. But keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be. So he's bringing her into the family. He's
Yeah.
being inclusive here with her. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young man not to, and there's the word, molest you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. So there's an important theological thing when you're reading the story called a type scene. A type scene is this: when you see a similar setting that's always proving a point. This particular type scene is called the woman at the well scene.
I like it already.
Okay, it's like where did Abraham's servant meet Rebecca? Well,
At a well.
At a well. Where did Jacob meet Rachel? At a well. Where did Moses meet Zipporah, his wife? At a well. And you get this woman at the well type scene that anytime there's a woman near a well and she accidentally and all these sovereign serendipities,
Yeah.
they always serendipitously meet their husband, and the result is a redemptive purpose goes forward. So Isaac marries Rebecca and God's people grow. Rachel and Jacob get married and God's people grow. Moses and Zipporah is a proof of God's people growing. And now we have another woman at the well. And Boaz tells her, so there's a well there. There's got to be with the vessels. She can't drink if there's not a well.
Right.
And so this woman's at a well and she meets her future husband in a serendipitous way. And if you're tracking the type scene, what you're figuring out is, oh, we can expect a redemptive solution to come. Something redemptive's about to happen. And this kind of thing continues on until Jesus meets the woman in Samaria at a well, where you see a woman, a discussion about marriage comes up.
Yep.
Jesus meets her biggest need, and what's the result? Many people, the family grows.
Yes.
The entire village in Samaria of Sychar believes in Jesus at that point. So again, just looking at it, it's like woman at the well meets her husband. We can expect God's redemptive family is about to grow.
Yeah.
So something to see there in the text.
Just a small thing to think about, consider as you go here.
The lesson here is not, if you're single listening to this, find a well.
That's right.
That's not.
That's right.
That's not the
lesson.
main point here. But God, tell us where those wells are.
That's
We
right.
can find a quality person.
There's a lot in Oklahoma where I'm born. So,
There you go.
yeah.
It's a great state.
Yeah,
I hear you.
absolutely.
That's- we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
pound
I
that.
mean, yeah.
I love what Boaz tells Ruth, like, because she's like, "Why have I found favor in your sight?" And he gives to her this description. Here's what I know about you, and it's incredibly honoring. That talks about who Ruth is and what she's done, and it hits on that Abraham theme
Yeah.
because he uses the same words. You left your father, your mother, and your native land to come to a people that you did not know
Right.
before. Is that right? Is all that Abrahamic
She's
language that
female
is
Abraham here. Yeah.
She's
yeah.
female Abraham.
That's right.
I love it. She's
That's
the
right.
matriarch. And he says, he talks about all that she's done. And he blesses her like with this huge reward. And you get this gorgeous, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.
There's an important thing about the wings too. So the Hebrew word for wings is kanaf.
Okay.
And what a kanaf is it is wings, like you think of a bird's wings or an eagle's wings.
Okay.
But it's also, back in the day, and we'll see this later on too, when a man wanted to marry a woman, he would take the corner of his robe and cover her. And the corner of that robe is called a kanaf. So basically, he's taking this woman under his wing.
Okay.
Now, in the Exodus, one of the key ways God carries his people out on his wings, on his kanaf. And then in Ezekiel 16:8, God talks about the Exodus event, and he describes it like, I took you to myself and I covered you with my kanaf, with my wing,
Oh,
and
wow.
I married you. I brought you to myself.
Mm.
So there's an irony here because you're going to track this word wings throughout. Here, Boaz says, "The Lord cover you," like with his wings.
Yeah.
Well, the way he's going to do that, though, is by her coming underneath Boaz's wing.
Yeah.
Here, so there's a little bit of a wordplay here
Yeah.
that he's expressing faith. God's going to redeem you. Like God's going to bring you under his wing. And then as the story goes on, God works through means, right?
Yeah.
God works through means. And his means here happens to be Boaz,
Right.
who will then take her under his wing. And that's just one of the few Exodus themes here. Again, it's like you got the wings language, you've got the number 6 language with the blessing and everything. But I love the mealtime. In verse 14 here. So it's mealtime. Again, you're just left with Moabites and Israelites are not meant to eat together.
Yeah.
But where's she at? He invites her.
Yes.
Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So they're going to be,
Sharing.
there's no chairs. This isn't table and chair setting. This isn't fine dining. This is lounging at a table, rubbing elbow to elbow. And again, in the Bible, in the biblical cultural context, tell me who you eat with, and I'll tell you who you are. So if you eat with unclean people, you are in threat of becoming unclean people.
Yeah.
So he feeds her. It says she sat next to the reapers, and he gets up, and he serves her. Like, again, countercultural because he's the master of the field.
Yeah.
People are supposed to be handing grain to him. He's supposed to be sitting, and his people are like she should be, ironically, like Ruth should be handing him the grain and serving him just out of payment of letting her be there.
Yeah.
He won't take it. He will not be. He will not be master. He will be servant here. So he gets up and he feeds her, and then there's this important phrase: "She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over." Now that Hebrew phrase, "She ate until she was satisfied and had some left over," is used in 2 instances. One is in Psalms when it talks about the people of Israel gathering manna. They ate, were satisfied, and had some left over. It also describes Jesus when he breaks the bread and the fish. The people ate, were satisfied, and had some left over. And I just think, again, a little connection, Jesus, not to lay out the cards too soon, but what other Davidic figure that who's in the Davidic line, who is rubbing shoulders at the table with unclean people,
Yep.
serving them bread, and they eat and are satisfied and have some left over. It's like this is Boaz being a preview of what Jesus is going to do here.
Yeah.
So
It's so generous, both
Yes.
totally just and overwhelmingly kind.
absolutely, just lavishing kind. I just love the concept of this isn't meeting the minimum. This is lavishing.
And serving and giving fullness
Yeah.
to someone that shouldn't be receiving that kind of treatment.
Yeah. I mean, you look at she pulls up an ephah of barley. That's huge. 22 liters
Okay.
Of-
what does that look like?
of grain. So, just take what do Cokes come in? 2-liter bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 20. Take 11 of those, and that's how much
11?
grain she picks up.
2-liter bottles of Coke.
Yeah, that's how much grain she picks up in a single day. It's a huge haul.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's way more. I mean, when you're gleaning, you're picking up handfuls of food. It really is like picking up manna. You got just enough for the day. She gets 22 liters. This is the amount of it here is just overabundance to show her she's not forgotten, that she's covered, she's cared for. She not only ate and was satisfied and had some left over and was able to keep the leftovers from lunch.
Yeah.
She also has 22. And it's just, again, God showing, I've got you, Ruth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got
And
you.
Naomi, I've
Yeah,
got you.
yeah.
Like
She goes
she's
back
going
home.
back. and
Yeah.
Naomi's probably blown away. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she says
sister,
that.
how'd
She-
you get all
Yeah.
this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's her
Yeah.
first question. Like, where were you today?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It reminds me maybe of a catch of fish that almost made a boat go
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
It was just overwhelmingly big with Jesus.
abundant. Gosh, God is so generous, and the people who image God best, who are most Christ-like, are overly abundant in their generosity. They don't just give; they lavish people with what they give. So, something to aspire to.
For sure.
That's incredible. Here we see that Naomi is now cueing in on something that happens, right? She actually talks about the Lord in not like the Lord has cursed me, the Lord's hand is against me, but
Yeah.
Naomi says to Ruth, may he be blessed, may Boaz be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. So this is our first like ray of hope, it seems, within Naomi's eyes
Yeah.
that something could happen here for us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, like we got to know the cultural context. Why she say has not forsaken the living or the dead? She's living, like Naomi and Ruth are living. What's at stake here is Elimelech and his sons have died, which means that the worst possible thing in their family has happened. Their name has been stricken from the existence of the world.
Right.
Right. So to die and to have no progeny.
Male, yeah.
Yeah, like you're it's as if you never existed. It's one of the big things with Jephthah, right?
Okay.
Part of Jephthah's punishment in Judges is his daughter never has kids, and that's like a huge strike from the Lord. It's like you never existed. You just get struck from the roles of humanity here. And so, from in this context, what Naomi is pointing out is like Elimelech has no name, and Mahlon and Chilion are no names, but the Lord remembers them. And what Boaz is going to do is he's going to redeem, and he's not going to redeem something for himself. He's going to redeem something for Elimelech. So, again, talk about overabundant kindness. God is so kind in his redemptive purpose. He's not just taking care of Naomi and Ruth, who are vulnerable and been victimized in many ways. He's caring for his stubborn child, Elimelech, who died because of his own stupid decisions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just so that Elimelech's name's not forgotten, so that his inheritance can continue. Because, again, Elimelech's inheritance is up for grabs. And it's like he's not a part of Israel anymore. And God's like, no, I still love Elimelech. And that's why she says, the Lord whose kindness is hesed. It's grace. Hesed is this covenant-keeping grace that you don't deserve. He's showing that to both Naomi and Ruth, but he's also showing it to those dead, stubborn Israelites that moved to Moab in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think of the lavish kindness of God in that.
Yeah. I'm feeling like in this story, it feels like the stakes are ramping up a little bit. Like it feels like if there was a beat to it, like things just got a little bit faster.
Yeah.
That she has happened upon, right? Just no mistakes, just happy accidents. This is our sovereign serendipity coming out loud and clear. That she has found herself in the field of a man who loves and is loyal to God. He gives her blessing, which is God's provision. And we're clued in as the reader, like, because it says he's a relative of Elimelech.
Yeah.
But then Naomi points it out here at the end, just in case you missed it. He's a relative of ours.
Yeah.
And we don't fully know what all of that means yet. We're about to find out. But, like, we're starting to see, like, this quickened pace of, like, things are developing here that matter in a really significant way. It feels like the tone is now shifting to, oh my gosh, something might be happening.
Right.
Something's happening here.
Things are moving. And she adds that extra hope, one of our redeemers, one
Yes.
of our goels. And it's like, okay, that it was really black in Ruth 1, like really dark, no light shining. Ruth 2, you see the crack of dawn.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it is, again, Lord of the Rings reference here. It's like on the third day, you know, it's like Gandalf coming over the horizon.
Yeah.
Well, Boaz is coming over the horizon,
Right.
and with him is the rays of the new day, the new dawn.
Yeah.
And I think Naomi's beginning to see that. She
Yeah.
doesn't know how it's going to play out. And in fact, we'll see in Ruth 3, she kind of tries to take matters in her own hands to capitalize on it. It doesn't do any good. We'll see why later on, because God's got it. But this is a turning point in the narrative. Things go from black to dawn, you know, pretty quickly.
You mentioned that word. We haven't gone here yet, but can you explain to us a little bit about why Goel is specific? Why is a redeemer specific? Can Ruth just marry whoever, and like can anyone just help them out? Why is this significant?
Yeah, it's all centered in the inheritance. That's where the original idea comes. Is every Israelite has an inheritance that's to stay in their family. The parcel of land that each Israelite gets is a personal gift from God to this Israelite family. So it's not just the wives, it's the land as well, and it's everything in this inheritance belongs to this particular family, which means it can't really go outside the family. Okay. It's got to stay in the family because God gave it to that family in particular. So again, it's not a possessive kind of thing, but it's just, the wife is a part of, she's kind of the key to the land inheritance as well here. So when Boaz is stepping in, it's not just a land acquisition. It's I'm taking on a wife to carry on the family line. And I just think what's cool about that kinsman redeemer theme is the Goel is meant to be a little example of the big Goel of the redeemer. And what is key about a Goel redeemer is redeemers are consistently stepping out of their own situation to take on the burden of somebody else's. The key to be a Goel redeemer is there's a problem. You have the ability to solve the problem, and you have the desire to do it. So you just think about Boaz is set. He's fine. He's got plenty of land. His land's going just fine. It's going to be costly for him to step into a different situation. Ruth and Naomi have a very expensive problem. The Elimelech's inheritance has got no name on it. Nobody can take care of the land. There's a big, expensive problem here.
Yeah.
Boaz is rich, and he's like, you know what? I'll take that problem onto myself.
Yeah.
And that's the key to the Redeemer theme is the problem. The Redeemer has the ability to solve the problem, but then the big kicker, he steps out of his own situation to solve the problem. And that's what Yahweh does all through the Old Testament. He did it in Exodus. Like, the fact that Israel's in Egypt is not his problem, right? He's God. He's self-satisfied. Nobody's making a slave of him. But he has the power to set them free, and then he willingly does so.
Yeah.
Not because he has to, but because he wants to.
Yeah.
And so it's like God and God wants his people. This is the only time we have in the Hebrew scriptures that we have a named human redeemer. So
It's always God outside of this?
it's always God outside of this. Yahweh, you get general kinsman redeemers, but this is the only time we see a kinsman redeemer with a name attached to it. And what that's trying to do is Boaz is a microcosm of the big redeemer, the big Goel. That's, capital G Goel. He's a little G Goel, So, yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to get that shirt made as Jesus, your Goel.
That's right.
I'm going to do that next. So this chapter wraps up with Naomi's excited, Ruth's excited. I am like imagining her coming in wherever they're living, and she's hauling in the suite, and Naomi's like, "What is happening right now?" And they're excited.
Yeah.
Where were you? I was like,
Yeah.
and they're connecting these
And then he
things.
served me, Mom.
and then this, and then this,
I
and
dipped
they're-
wine in the same.
and maybe they're jumping a little.
Yeah.
Like
This
we
is way
do.
better than a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's
this
say.
is so
yeah.
much better.
And this lady over here was looking at us, but I don't really worry about her because I was with Boaz.
Didn't even matter because that's where I was.
That's funny.
This closes with Ruth finishes out the harvest, and she lives with her mother-in-law. So, like, about how much time is that? Like, if she enters at the beginning of the harvest, she stays through the end of it.
Yeah.
About how much time is that
Yeah.
sort of
I hate to say
insinuating to us?
definitively because I don't know, but I'm going to guess it's about a month.
Okay.
It's more than a few days.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So there's a flow to these things. These are big fields. Harvest takes a while. There's got to be beaten out, and then there's the celebration at the threshing floor later on. So we're talking a handful of days here, probably.
So definitely a Hallmark movie approved amount of time
Yes.
for something to get sparked there. I
Right.
think it's great.
Definitely over Christmas and into New Year. Right?
Absolutely. It's definitely that amount of time in this love story. This has been incredible. I would love to hear like from both of you as we've heard about this Redeemer and how it so much points us to who God is in Jesus. How can this encourage us on a very daily basis? We talked about in the intro, like God works in mundane things and he is present when we don't even see him. But how does this chapter encourage us as we read it, as we're experiencing the story one chapter at a time?
Yeah. I'm curious, what would your answer be to that?
Something that stuck out to me was how the Lord used Naomi's healing through someone else's kindness and generosity.
Yeah.
And just how that was the beginning of her softening. And you
Yeah.
mentioned the darkness lifted, but my heart just hurt so badly for her in these opening
Yeah.
verses and chapter. It's like that I could be maybe someone just out of some kindness. Maybe it's just one interaction
Yeah.
or a long-term relationship with someone,
Right.
on Quinn's sports team or
Right.
through the church, a relationship of just that it's not preaching at, but it was just their healing came from someone's kindness
That's
and
right.
generosity. I think that
That's right.
just makes you think about like how you interact
Yeah.
through a day
Yeah.
in your life. So
Yeah.
that's something that just kind of stuck out.
I think that you're hitting on a big point there, because that's the whole key to the Exodus theme, to all of that. God wants his people's lives to be a mini replica or rehearsal of the kind of redemption he's given them. So, I mean, Jesus says it like, love others. Why? Because
At first, yeah.
as I have loved you. It's like we have been the receivers of redemption, the recipients of redemption. And so now we try to replicate that in the way we interact with others. So there's a huge, Boaz is just giving what he's gotten.
Yeah.
He's gotten big things from the Lord. This is his inheritance that they're plowing and working in and harvesting. And so he's giving out of the generosity that the Lord has already given him. And there's so much to that. I think you're right. You hear testimonies of people and you never in the moment feel it. You never feel like you're a big piece in somebody's life. It's
true. Yeah.
Like that conversation. But I've been a pastor long enough that I've heard enough stories that redemption stories often started with, I came to the church for the first time. I thought I wouldn't stick around, and somebody said hi.
Yeah.
Or somebody had a cup of coffee with me.
Yep.
Or my husband was sick, and they brought me a meal. Like those little moments are big miniature redemption stories.
Yeah. And they could feel like the little parcels on the ground to us.
Totally.
Yeah.
A hello, a smile feels like the thing that fell.
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
like, well, you gather enough of those and you fill a 2-liter Coke
Yeah.
that feeds you. Like as believers and children, of God, if we all worked in that life, it's 100 little moments of
Yeah.
Christians and just loving people
Yeah.
adds up
Yeah.
to,
Totally.
to feeding you,
Yeah.
feeding your soul, giving you hope.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think another thing to do is like Ruth and Naomi's lives begin to change again because of that accident, because of that sovereign serendipity. It's like all of this happens because she happened. She stumbled into Boaz's field. I think we as Christians, there's really not a choice for us not to be optimist. Like we can be realists, right? But one thing we can't be is cynics, right? We are called to be healthy optimists. Why? Because we have a Redeemer who sees us. And you never know. Today could be the day that the Lord allows you to stumble into Boaz's field, and you wouldn't even know it. Like I'm sure, again, she stumbles into Boaz's field. She doesn't know what's coming. She just gets up day after day after day under this strange kindness from this weird guy
Yeah.
that's like taking an interest in her, and she's asking him like, why have I, a foreigner, found favor with you? Like she didn't get it, and I'm sure she didn't get it for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with our lives. We as Christians cannot afford to be cynics. We as Christians cannot afford to be pessimists. We as Christians need to be optimists because we know that there's a Redeemer who can change things in an instant. So,
Yeah. So much hope.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in this episode for our Ruth study and podcast. And we're so grateful we're here, and we cannot wait because it will get a little bit intense next chapter. So join us on the threshing floor next time. Y'all keep listening, keep reading. We're grateful for you.
Having
Thanks.
fun.